I was about to ask a question, and Jenny kind of segued for me beautifully. She got all 6s, 3s, and 1s on her rolls. How many things did you get? Is equal number roughly? 4 3s, 4 3s, 4 1s, 2 6s. I was just about to ask the question, why do we even care about outliers? Why would we even care about them? Why do you think? What's so interesting about being atypical? Go ahead, Andrew, give me one thing.
They might skew the data.
Good. If you have extremes, then X bar, your average, definitely, and since X bar, also S, can be artificially skewed. Artificially skewed. This actually popped up kind of in 244. I had given them a bunch of data from patients who had acute head trauma and had their IQ tested after they had acute head trauma, and they were known to have an average IQ of 100 beforehand. Then they had their IQ tested afterwards, and they wanted to see if there was any kind of a change. And there was a change, but the data contained outliers, the after data. So some of the people that had an average IQ of 100 before head trauma ended up with a very, very high IQ afterwards, 120, 124. And that's unusual. Even, no matter how you measure it, it's unusually high. But the average came in lower on average. So the outliers actually pulled the average higher, but it was actually going lower. So it was an interesting... yes, Andrew, right? That's what I'm getting at here is this can happen. So if you have outliers, you might want to reconsider using the average. Very good, my friend, very good. Why else do we care?
Don't things group together?
Say that again.
They bunch.
They can bunch, and if they do bunch, what might be happening? JC's onto something over there. If they do bunch, especially in large data sets like that energy drink data set we looked at on Thursday, if you get a bunch of outliers bunching, what might that be trying to tell you? It happened again with not so much with your guys' classes today, but the other classes' guesses of my height. What's one of the theories we put forth about that data?
Closer you are to the board, the taller you seem.
Well, maybe we came to the correlation because I don't have the data for the class. But when their data looked like this, what was one theory we put forth about them?
The way you were dressed.
Well, but this is all them. And I was dressed kind of like this, like a bum, like I usually dress.
Short people perceive you...
Don't have that correlation, brother. All I got is the height guesses.
I don't remember that.
That's okay. We sent it out 10 minutes ago.
There's 2 data.
Maybe, thank you, Cameron, maybe there are 2 data sets. So maybe the presence, that's what I'm getting at with JC's comments, some of them clump together. Maybe their presence indicates, and I'm going to put otherwise hidden difference. So you can throw all the data on one line, graph it, take a look at it, and go like, what the hell, it's bimodal. That's interesting. Or it's trimodal, or something like that. And maybe the unusual ones aren't necessarily the endpoints, but they're the ones in the middle. Maybe, possibly. But yeah, sometimes outliers show you that there's something. Give you an example. It was late, I want to say it was late 80s, early 90s. And there was a road and track car study done on a bunch of mid-sized 4-door station wagons. Remember station wagons? They call them SUVs now. So 4-door station wagons, mid-sized. Test was done. They did like the Buick Estate wagon. They did, crap, I don't remember. That's the one I remember because that's the one the study was really kind of focused on. And what they did was they ran a bunch of different things: acceleration test, braking test, fuel economy, all kinds of things, overall vehicle weight, engine capacity, horsepower, and the cars were identical in every component except for miles per gallon. The Buick Estate wagon was getting significantly higher MPGs than all the other cars in the study, which was weird because all the other cars in the study were essentially identical to the Buick Estate 4-door wagon. I guess I call it 5-door because it's a station wagon. So what the hell was going on? Why would they be identical? They checked capacity, they checked fuel, they checked fuel consumption with the miles per gallon came from. They checked horsepower. They switched out drivers to see if maybe the drivers on the Buick Estate wagon were being more consistent. So they swapped drivers out, but they were still getting the slightly higher fuel economy each time. So what was going on? What do you think was going on? You were seeing basically, here's the miles per gallon of all the cars in that study, except for the little hump that was the Buick Estate wagon, which was higher. So what do you think?
Different part, like injectors or something?
No, everything, all of that was essentially the same. Some of the cars even essentially had the same engine, 2 different models. Interesting. Michael, go.
The environment that they tested each vehicle?
It was standardized. It was standardized. Same track, same atmospheric conditions. Good, good. Keep thinking. What else?
What about gas?
Same gas. Same gas. Good, good. Keep thinking, keep thinking.
Did they check the tire pressure?
They did. And the Buick Estate wagon recommended a higher PSI in their tires. But nobody caught that at first. They just filled it to whatever the PSI said in the book, but nobody registered that they were going for 42, everybody else was 35. And the lower rolling resistance equated to, is that what you were going to say, Scotty?
No, I was going to say maybe Buick did the study.
Oh, no, this was car and driver, totally third party. No. the old airborne. Buy our drug, it works, we tested it. Yes, exactly. That's fantastic. There was a tire pressure, less rolling resistance, but nobody caught that. And as soon as they dropped the tire pressure back to everybody else's, the gas mileage basically got swallowed right back up into the group. But they were outliers. They were outliers when compared to the rest of the group. Now, one way you can deal with outliers is to throw them away. You can just throw them away and say, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to look at that because it's ruining my beautiful bell curve. That's probably the worst thing you can do, assuming the data is good. Now, sometimes you should do that, because sometimes they show bad data. For example, if Buick was doing this study, I would throw that out. But if they're outliers based on bad data collection, canon. I gave you guys an example on your last exam where I had a bunch of bags of chips and their weights. And I said, suppose one of the bags of chips had a weight of 4.6 grams instead of 45.6 grams. Well, I asked you what would change, the mean, the median, or the mode. What I should have also asked you to do for extra credit is what would you do with that data point? Now, chances are, that's an outlier based on a malfunction. Whether it was a weight malfunction, or whether it was a bag-filling chip malfunction. Maybe the machine that filled that bag had a hiccup, or there was a mouse stuck in the part or something, and the chips... I for some reason thought of that when I was talking about food and outliers. I always hear about the McDonald's people that find the mouse in the French fries. Sorry, didn't upset anybody. But anyway, the point is that's most likely a defect, and you should throw that data point out. You should throw that data point out. But let me give you one to chew on to try to give you the idea of why you shouldn't just throw out a data point because it's different. Okay, and it's not at all obvious. Here, oh, it's my plan. Here we go. I'm going to show you a horizontal axis. I'm going to show you a horizontal axis. And this is going to be years of age. Years of age. I'm going to show you 2 data points. 0, I'm going to put 6 over here, I'll put 3 right here. I'll show you 2 data points. This happened right about there, if I remember correctly. And according to my mother, it happened right about there. So the red dot is the time period in Max's life when he started riding a bicycle. That's when he started riding a bike. Right before his 3rd birthday. One of the happiest days of my life, watching him pedal away. What's that?
Like big wheels count?
Yeah, like on a crank bike. You know, we worked at it. We worked with him quite a bit in the 6 months leading up to this, running behind him, you know, holding the seat, letting go, and then grabbing again when he started crashing, letting go and letting go and grabbing. And this blew my mind. I'm like, that seems so early, like right before 3. So I called my mom, like, Mom, when did I start riding a bike? She's like, Jesus. And she goes back and finds the baby book. She's like, it's not in your baby book. I'm like, well, I don't think it was a baby on my bike. And then she started thinking about it again. She called my dad. And I think he was like 6. And she's like, I think he was 5. So I'm going to go with 5.5, somewhere in there. I'm like, Max just started riding. And she's like, what? He's not even 3 yet. No, he's August before his 3rd birthday. And if I'm riding out here and he's riding back here, now, granted, 3 years is not a big deal in certain things, but to me, this seems significant. It seemed to me very significant. So I started asking my other friends that I still stay in touch with, when did you guys remember starting to ride a bike? They're like, yeah, I was like in 1st grade or kindergarten. I was like, damn. And I started kind of plotting it, and it started looking kind of like this. as I threw more dates on, and granted, this was after almost 40 years of remembering, so we were ballparking it. But nobody was saying they were riding a bike at 3 and 4. They were all saying like 5, 6, and maybe sometimes even 7. And I'm throwing Max up there. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Why would he start? So what do I do? Do I just assume my son's a freak?
Yes.
What could explain the difference? Because apples for apples, it was almost the same. My mom ran behind me holding my seat, letting me go. When I was learning.
It's because you're like an avid bike rider, so he's kind of like,
That would be like dance.
I decided, that's possible. Nobody bike commuted back in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
So anyway, I chased that down. And what I did was I started asking all of Jen's mom's friends who also had kids. There's this mom's group they hang out with, and they all have kids at the same time. So I said, when did Owen start riding? And when did Caden start riding? And when did Hollis start riding? Hollis, love that name. And I started getting numbers. They made a big deal on Owen, because Owen was the first kid in the group to ride his bike. He was 3 months before Max. He's also 4 months older than Max, so it kind of made sense as far as like whatever the chronologically. So I started putting their dates on, and I noticed this. This was all the mom's group's kids, and this was my group's kids back in the 70s on the East Coast. And I said, okay, so Max is definitely an outlier when viewed with my distribution, but he's definitely not an outlier when viewed with his kids' distributions. So I started chasing down what the differences were. Two things, one of which is more easily believable than the other. The first is that he sees me riding a bike all the time, wants to be like Dad, wants to ride his bike too. But I see a lot of kids riding their bikes around the neighborhood with parents that aren't bike commuters. I mean, I leave the house at 4:30 in the morning. He never sees me leave the house. He rarely sees me coming back. I pick him up from school on a bike, but that's after he's been riding already for 3 years. So I said, okay, maybe it's not that. Maybe there's something else. And not to mention that some of Jen's mom's friends and their spouses aren't big bike riders. So I looked deeper, and I found something very interesting, and some of you might know this. Does anybody have kids or know of kids that are just starting to ride a bike in this town? And this never existed where I lived. I don't think the actual type of bike existed. Have you seen these kids on the little scoot bikes? It's a bike with 2 wheels and no pedals that sits them very close to the ground so they can basically walk on the 2 wheels. So it's almost like one of those little cool little flying saucer things, but it's 2 wheels in line like a bike. And the idea is you get them on there really early, put the helmet on their head, get them on there really early, let them walk around. And they lift it and they do this. But if you get them on it early enough, what they start doing, and it's cute to watch over time, is they'll be walking and then they'll kick and they'll lift their feet up. And then they get freaked out and put their feet down. Just cry a little bit. And then they go do it again. And then months pass, and they get a little more brave, and they'll kick and glide. And what they're developing is balance. What did I use when I was learning how to ride a bike? Training wheels, which is the opposite of balance. It's training you to lean on your training wheels. Then you take the wheels off and you crash because you haven't been working on balance at all. So I think the difference in these graphs has everything to do with the balance that these kids, because every one of these kids used a scoot bike. Every single one. And FYI, they're very expensive, they're made of wood, and they're gorgeous. We went to the secondhand store for $5 a Fisher Price bike and cut the cranks off of it and ripped the chain off of it and gave it to Max. Worked just as great. Just FYI. Sherilyn?
Even just the scooters that the kids have nowadays in comparison, I mean, we didn't have
Those things scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, we didn't have things like that. We used to have all of the toys and things that work you up to that.
Of course, of course.
Nowadays.
Be very careful with those scooters. Those wheels. I've seen Max go down hitting pebbles with that thing. It's amazing. I mean, he won't even ride it anymore. He's like, the hell with this. He gets on his 20-inch or his 16-inch wheel bike and goes. Yeah, but the idea that you're working on balance the entire time while you're kind of learning how to walk, it becomes part of you, like walking becomes part of you. And that's my explanation for this to this. I have no idea if that's right. Seems logical to me.
I think there's chemicals in water and they're building up to be super kids.
Yes, that's another explanation. I have no proof. I have no proof. Although the water tastes damn good here.
Do you remember the big wheel bikes? Like the huge front
Do
wheel?
I?
They were.
Yeah, they need to make those again.
Well, I don't think they can because they were sued too many times. I'm pretty sure there's some lawsuits involving those that they're pretty much going to say that you can't have. I should have bought a few of those and put in storage. Big plastic wheels, that's a great idea. I agree, they were awesome. Tricycles, same thing. These are like a big tricycle. Anyway, that's the kind of why we care about outliers. So we're out of time. Let's take our 5, but I want to come back to Jenny's concern about her 6s, 3s, and 1s, and her lack of 2s, 4s, and 5s. Yes? Okay, we'll take 5. Go walk around. We'll come back, collect some data.